Thank you. Okay, welcome back. It's COMP3025. Here we go. And it's the winter 2016 semester, and we are week 2, lesson 2, part 1. We've just finished our little test where it looks like for the most part nobody got perfect. You got perfect? Okay, maybe a couple people got perfect. Anyone else got perfect over there? 5 out of 5? Okay, we got a couple people that got 5 out of 5. And it was really all about just to know some simple questions. For example, the main language that we're going to be using is Swift. It's not the only language. What's the other language you can use to program with for iOS? Yeah.
Objective-C.
Objective-C. What about other languages? Is there another language? Yeah.
C.
Could you see? What other languages can you use?
C# if you wanted to build using, for example.
You could, but it's but native. If I was going to say native, I didn't say native in the question, but if I was going to go say native, the only ones you can use are C, C++. You could use C++ too, believe it or not.
Objective-C and C are like basically interchangeable, really.
No.
I mean, in the Mac sense, in the iOS sense.
No. There's some certain things you need to use, and Objective-C is. I know what you're saying, but
you can write C code in Objective-C.
Yes, but you still need Objective-C libraries.
Yeah.
It's all written there, so you can't do it without Objective-C. And I'll tell you something else, guys and girls. We cannot write an app right now on iOS or whatever without Objective-C. Even now, right? Even though we're running Swift, there's still, for the most part, on the back end, it's Objective-C.
So
they're still not fully converted to Swift. There's a lot of libraries out there that are Objective-C. So it's not going to hurt to learn about Objective-C. We won't do Objective-C in the classes. We just don't have the time for us to do that. But Objective-C is the back end. You could write stuff in pure C and other languages, C++ and so on, to help you out. And this browser, this IDE supports writing things in C, C++, Objective-C, Swift, and so on. Again, Swift is the new language, and we're going to talk about that a lot today. How about this? One of the questions was, can you really, make iOS applications without a Mac? And the answer is no. That's the answer. You really can't, and I'll tell you why before you put your hand up. The reason why you can't do it is because you need Xcode of some sort. Even if you were to write, if you were using Xamarin, right? If you were going to use Xamarin Studio, you need a Mac. You can write Xamarin Studio on a PC, but you got to bridge it to a Mac to make it work. Right, in terms of Xcode and everything else. If you actually look it up online, it'll tell you that, right? If I use iOS, if I was going to write an iOS app with something like other kind of software that it was non-native, like for example, some kind of software that wrapped things around it, like Accelerated Titanium, I couldn't write an iOS app with Accelerated Titanium. I could write everything else. I can write BlackBerry, I can write Android or whatever. If I don't have a Mac, I can't deploy to iOS, which is a bad thing. Same thing with if I was using something like the Ionic framework. If I'm using Ionic, which is a really cool framework, guys. And again, I would, if you're someone who likes AngularJS and the whole mean stack and all that kind of stuff, it's a great transition. You write a Node.js app with a MongoDB backend database, and use the Ionic framework with Cordova to create your Android and iOS application. Really cool. You can't use an iOS application. You can only make the Android piece if you're on a PC. It'll never deploy, right? The only thing that you can make on iOS, which is kind of funny that you can do this on a PC, is if you use Unity or Unreal, you can create a Unity or Unreal application, like a game or an interface, and then deploy you can create a deployment target, a build for Unity or Unreal through a Unity or Unreal to iOS. And you can't test it because you still need a device to plug into, and you need Xcode in order for you to deploy the actual.
So you would deploy it from Unity and then load it onto your Mac.
You could have to load it onto Mac. Still have to have a Mac at the end of the day. If you actually do any kind of tutorials online, one of the things they say is, what about a Hackintosh, right? Hackintosh, another way to do it. You don't really need a Mac. It's a Hackintosh. It's like I said last week. It's a pain in the ass. Surely it's a pain in the ass. At the end of the day, there's so many updates. Look, we just got an update just now for the latest version of iOS, and it's asking me, should I update, right? I said, no, I've deferred it. But at the end of the day, there's updates for iOS throughout the version's life cycle. So iOS 9.1.3 or whatever the hell just came out, right? And then it's going to keep happening. So imagine you're a developer and using a Hackintosh, and that means I got to update my Xcode, right? And I can't somehow, because I need to update my I need to do a small update sometimes for my Mac OS, and you can't on a Hackintosh. If you update your Mac OS, sometimes it'll break your Mac, right? Yeah.
Are you saying Hackintosh?
I am. Yeah. It's an actual thing. They do that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
And like, what kind of processor architecture? Don't you need a special processor architecture for it to work?
For Mac? No, it's
To
just
have Hackintosh.
it's an Intel. No, as long as you have an Intel architecture, you're good. So the CPU is fine. If you were going to look it up, Tony Mac. If you actually don't, if you're interested in doing that, go up to Tony Mac. Search Tony Mac for a Hackintosh up
You
online.
can install like an AMD processor.
You can't do an AMD processor. There's recommended hardware if you wanted to build one. For example, you need certain NVIDIA cards or whatever for your video card. They recommend certain motherboards if you're going to build it from scratch, like if you really want to build one. Some laptops are already compatible, like there's certain laptops that you can make it run, so it runs fairly good. But at the end of the day, it's not a Mac. And the problem is when you come to updating, now imagine me, I'm a developer, and then I got to go fool around with my operating system again. I hate that. I'm sorry. I want my operating system to be as stable as possible, develop my stuff, and move on, right? So that's why I got a Mac, not because of anything else. I want to be able to do cross application development.
You want to have money on my
What if you have a Mac with Windows on it? Does that work?
Yeah, it does.
Does it?
Yeah. Actually, it runs better. It runs Windows better than Windows does. Like in the regular system. Honestly, I run Windows 10 on my Mac in Boot Camp, right? And it runs great.
Yeah, use Boot Camp, use VMware, you got it.
Yeah, you get it all. I mean, I can run. You know, actually, that's the one thing they tell you. And I was bugging my developer buddies. I was like, dude, you know a fix? Because I had a problem with my Hackintosh at the time, and I had a separate hard drive. I was running my Hackintosh on a second hard drive on my laptop, and I had to modify the kext files and all this kind of stuff, get into the operating system and everything else, and write my own driver. You know, I had to do all this stuff, and I'm thinking, man, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of time, of my time, that I'm spending trying to fix my Hackintosh, right? What the hell? And the guy said, dude, just get a Mac, right? And he goes, and then run Windows on the other side, or run Linux, or whatever you want, right? And I'm thinking, I don't know. And like I said before, as students, you guys get some great academic discounts. And you can always buy a refurbished Macintosh computer, like 2 weeks refurbished. We're talking out of the Apple Store, right? 2 weeks, certified refurbished Mac, and you save $500, right?
So would that be like just returned or like something that was originally
Yeah.
defective or something?
So you buy one, and you're like, man, I don't like this one. I want the better one, right? And then
Someone returns it. And then
someone returns it. It's got to be 2 weeks old max, and then they kind of look at it and everything else. And if everything's clean, there's no scratches, it's in the box and all that kind of stuff, they can return it and they'll resell it. They'll clean it up. They'll take the stuff off of it. They'll and then you're good to go. Huh?
Just ask for it, like, do I need 2 week olds or something?
No, you go up online. Damn, I have to do this, guys. Come on.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you meant like you
Let's
walked
do
into
it.
the store. I know
Let's
what
do
it
it.
is online.
You know what? Let's do it. Someone can ask the questions.
Tom, get us all Macs. Let's go.
I would love to.
Show us
You
all
know.
the YouTube,
Sure.
So,
So- So you go down to the to Apple. If you go to Apple, if you want to check this out, on the bottom, there's a couple of options. One of them is refurbished. There's also education, Apple for Education, which is I recommend if you're really interested, right? But if you go to refurbished, let's say you don't go to education at all, and you go to refurbished, and you look for what you're looking for. Let's say I want a refurbished Mac. I kind of look at that, right? And then you can see, like, for example, here's a refurbished 11.6-inch MacBook Air, sorry. And again, it's an i5 processor with 4 gigs of RAM and let's say 128 gigabyte SSD for $929, right? So it's 15% off, right? And it tells you the model, March 2015. That's when you got it from. So you can go through this thing and you can see that there's a bunch of different ones. And as the price is going to go up as you keep going more and more powerful. Like if you want to go to something like a 15-inch MacBook Pro, which sometimes they have near the bottom, you can see how the price keeps going up. Here we go. So 15.4-inch MacBook Pro, 2.2 gigahertz quad-core i7 with 16 gigs of RAM and a 256 SSD is $2,000 pretty much. And again, you save about $350 or 15% off, right? And so it's a 2-week-old Mac, you get it, and you can still get Apple Care for it and all that kind of stuff if you have a problem, and they'll support you. So it's not like undoable that you can get a Mac. It's still, even refurbished, it's still more expensive than if you're buying a PC, or if you want to make a PC, you can make it much cheaper or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's the only way you're going to get to be able to develop properly. If you're going to be an iOS developer, you got to get a Mac. Okay. Xcode is at version 7 right now. For those people who don't know, Xcode version 7 in iOS 9. So that was the other question I asked, true or false, right? Xcode 7 is only available in Mavericks, the latest version of Mavericks, and if I'm not wrong, El Capitan, right, which is what we're running right now. The system in front of you is called El Capitan. That's the version of Mac OS X that we're looking at. OS X 10.11 is what your VM is running right now. So that is what you require to run iOS 9, so actually develop for iOS 9, and Xcode 7. And again, they just had an update for Xcode 7 that supports the latest version of iOS 9 dot whatever that just came out, which we're not going to do, because then you'd have to update yours and you can't. Okay, questions around anything else that we asked on the quiz that you didn't quite get or you don't agree with? Please put up your hand. All right. Yes.
If I'm opening a project in Xcode,
Yes.
and I want to open it up straight from Git, is there like a quick way to do this from the splash menu window?
Open it from Git? No. The best way to do it is, like I said, and this I was just going to go do that. If I go up on GitHub, and if you want to download that application that we just did, so if I go into Georgian, where I have our stuff, and if I was going to look at COMP3025, and here's our quiz app. This is the one I put up, right? So if I click on this one, the best way to do this, if you notice, is here's our project, right? I'm going to download this thing. I'm going to download this as a zip. So here, let's just do it together, right? So,
This VM is so slow, man.
sorry?
This VM is really slow.
Just give it a second. It'll boot up and you'll be happy. Don't worry. So I'm going to put it on my desktop just to check it out. So here's my COMP3025 quiz app. It's going to come up with master at the end, right? And again, you can change all that. So now it's on my messy desktop. Let's just go back there for a second. And here it is, right? What I want to do is I want to double click here and extract, and that's easy to do that on a Mac. And when I look through this thing, I have my quiz app, right? So there it is. Now I probably want to rename it from master because that's the master branch that you're downloading from GitHub. So how do I open this thing if I wanted to open this one? Well, you still got to go to Xcode. So I already have Xcode open. I have to, if I go right from file, right, as an example, notice how I can't just do open, right? I can't do open, right? That won't do. That won't pretty much do it. I have to close down my project. So if I close my project, notice it's closed. And if I go File, Open now, and I go to wherever my quiz app is, which is on my desktop. So this is the COMP3025 quiz app. And if I press Open, see, I'm on the root of my folder here, right? That's how I do it. Where my README file is. I'm not inside the quiz itself. I'm not in here. I'm on the outside, where I see my quiz.xcode project file right here. If I click Open, then it's going to say, does not support opening folders without project or workspace. Okay, cool. Let's try this out. How do I do that, right? Let's check it out again. So File, Open. Or if I double click, what if I double click on that thing? What does it do? Right, so here I am. And I double click on this thing, and then here's my quiz app, right? Is it a working project though? Let's take a look, right? Is it a working project? Yeah, it's all right here. So if I take a look at my quiz app itself, I get my whole, the regular thing that I got here. So I just double click to open it up in Xcode, right? And notice how I also have, all the different details here. Again, this is my, what's this pane called? This pane here. What is this pane for? Anybody? Huh?
Explorer pane?
The navigator's pane. Okay, I might ask you this. I'm going to explore these these questions on the quiz next week. Right? This pane is the navigator's pane. Right? What's this pane for? Primarily.
Details?
Mostly it's the editor pane. If I single click on a file, I don't double click. If I double click, and Rich found this out last week, if you're used to double clicking, let's say Visual Studio, right? If you double click it, it'll open up the file that you're looking at in its own file itself. It's its own pane, right? So I only have to single click to switch between views, right? So that's all I'm doing here, right? So this is the editor view, or the main, the view that I'm looking at right here. And how about this one? What's this view called over here? This is the
Properties?
details view. This is more of the details where I get all the details, right? On the top here, I have some additional options. What do these options do? On the top right corner, it's really, yeah, I can show and hide my navigator. If you actually hover over there, it says hide or show navigator. So I can hide or show this one. I can hide or show this one. I can hide or show the debugger, which is on the bottom. I can make more space for myself to run, to write iOS, my iOS applications. If I'm going to do the next piece we're going to do to kind of add functionality to our app, right? We need to kick off this little window here. What's this little window for? This assistant editor, right? Why would I use this assistant editor for that, right? I actually can, it'll split my window, right? So if I actually pull up this assistant editor, so first let me go back and I'll pull up my navigators pane, and I'm going to go back to my main storyboard. So now I can see what I've done so far, right? So here's my application, right? What's this for? What's this pane right here? What is it for? Anybody? Why do I need this part? If I have my storyboard here, or what's this for?
It lists all the objects that are in your view here.
It's my view hierarchy, right? So my view hierarchy, or basically what it does is it shows me how all of my objects on my view are nested, right? So you can see the nesting order. Here's my view controller container, right? And inside my view controller container, I've got some different objects, right? I've got my top layout guide, my bottom layout guide. Inside there, I have another view container right there. There's my view container. And inside my view container, I got a couple of labels. How they're labeled is the L for label and B for button. And I also have my constraints. All my constraints are layered inside of this hierarchy. So you can see the whole view hierarchy. This is really important because if you ever want to troubleshoot what's going on, you can actually click. If you have trouble clicking on what's going on over here in the storyboard, you can always click inside the view hierarchy here in order for you to figure out what's going on over here. If I want to select an object like this one, I could certainly select it by clicking on it here, left clicking, but I can also select objects from in here, right? Which is a lot of the times more, I recommend it, okay? Let me tell you why. If I click an object here, do I have a chance to move it around by accident? Chances are I do. If I just click and drag a little bit, I can mess up my view, right? Why would I want to do that? Once I've set everything up, my constraints and everything else, I want to select them over here if I can, right? So I don't mess this up over here, right? And here what you can also do is you can drag and drop these objects from one container to another so you can layer them in a different order if need be, right? Okay, so that's why you have this hierarchy view. I can also close off this view, eh? Like if I click this button here, it closes off, right? So I see something else, right? So I can look at the structure, or I can close it off. I can also click this button down here. Take a look at this button down here, which is hide document outline, this hierarchy. So I have more view on this side. And let's hide this. Let's hide the navigators again. So I'm hiding the navigators. And now I'm going to pull up this part right here, which is my assistant editor. Now if I pull up my assistant editor, guess what pulls up with it? This, my view controller. Remember model view controller, right? This view controller is the logic that's tied into my view. It's not a view controller. The file is called a view controller, right? But it's just a controller for my view. That's what I want you to think about it like. I know I'm saying the same words, but listen to what I'm saying here, right? I have model view controller, right? Model represents the data that I'm going to connect to, and usually there's some kind of pattern to my model, right? I don't have a model right now. Okay, I have a view, which is my storyboard. I have a controller, which is where my logic sits. My file is called view controller, right? But it doesn't mean that it's a view and a controller. It's not a view. It's just the logic for the view, the controller for the view, okay? It's just, so don't, I'm putting it out there because some people are like, hey, how come Apple breaks the whole model view controller paradigm, right? It doesn't. It's just a naming convention, right? So that's one thing. You need both these two things up to properly connect and create an action. So who did their homework? What do I do next? I'm not going to look at the PowerPoint. What do I do next to connect my buttons? You know, I want to create something inside my view controller. What do I do? Anyone remember off the top of their head? The guys who did their homework. Who did their homework?
Yeah.
Huh?
So what's the question again, sorry?
So how do I connect my buttons? I want to make a binding between my buttons and my labels to the view controller. What do I do? Anyone know beforehand? But I'm going to tell you. But how do I do
the
that?
object somehow.
Sorry?
I'm going to reference the object somehow.
I know, but how do I do it? Anyone know how to do it? Jean-Claude, did you do the homework? No? Okay.
I did.
You don't remember, right? Well, here's the thing I can't do. If I grab this, if I take a look at my
Oh, you create a handler.
if I click my next question, right, as an example, and if I hold down the control key, so hold down the control key for me. So I'm taking my next question button, and I'm holding down the control key. I'm targeting inside of my class, so inside of my view controller, right? And once I'm in there, you see that there's a little line that comes up, right? Here, see how it comes up? All right, I'm creating a connection or a binding from my storyboard, and I'm letting go, right? Now it's going to ask you, what kind of connection do you want to make? Is it an outlet or an action, right? Those are the two options you have here and up here. What would you say it's going to be?
An action.
An action, right? Because an action is like an action listener or an event handler or some one of those. So I'm going to click action. Now we're not done. You have to name it. What's the name of my action? I'm not going to look at the PowerPoint. Let's make it up, right? What would I do? How do I do this thing so we can get this done?
Next question, please.
Maybe next question clicked, something like that, right? Makes sense. It's like any other thing. So if I put next question clicked, so that's when that clicks. And if I click, oh, the other one is, here's another one. From my event perspective, it says touch up inside. I always loved that one when I was doing iOS stuff. This is an old term that comes back from.
Oh, true.
This is an old term that comes from Objective C. Touch up inside, right? Touch up inside. It means that when you have the button itself, you're touching on the inside of the button. So I have to touch the inside of the button in order for me to activate my action. Now notice there's other options here, like for example, touch down, right, or touch drag. You know, those kind of things. Touch up inside is what I want to do, right? So touch up inside. I always want to do that, right? Okay, and then connect, right? When I do that, it creates a couple things for you on in your view controller, right? It creates this IB action. What does IB stand for?
Internal button.
No,
Oh, interface button.
no.
Interface.
Almost, you have one word that's right? Thank you. It comes from the old interface builder. This is back to the history, right? Remember, Xcode was not one system before. It wasn't one IDE like Visual Studio. Well, actually, even Visual Studio wasn't really one IDE before, right? It had different parts. So they had this other application called Interface Builder. An Interface Builder was separate. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying it's an Interface Builder action, right? Because Interface Builder, which is now our storyboard, maybe they should call it storyboard action in the future, right? Maybe they will in future iterations, right? And you notice I'm using the @ decorator. I'm using the @ decorator, right? So this is actually a function, okay? So, and take a look at our class. We're talking about Swift today anyway later on, right? So I've got my class. Notice I have the name of my class, view controller. There's Swift for you, right? And I have a colon and then something else that comes after. What would this be, this thing that comes after, if you're an object-oriented person?
Type. Use the object type.
Class, name of the class, and then what's this? Huh?
Inheritance, yeah.
Inheritance. So what would this be then? Superclass, yeah. Right. This is the superclass over here, right? So colon superclass, and in Swift, there's only single inheritance. There's no multiple inheritance, just like in most languages, other than C++. C++ supports multiple inheritance.
So
Right.
what we just did is really the equivalent of on a .NET app when we double click on a button, we've dragged on there and Visual Studio writes the event handler.
Correct. We would double click on the button in Visual Studio. Here, there's no double clicking. You'd be forgiven to think you can do that. Unfortunately, you cannot. So you cannot double click on the button to make sure that it links. It doesn't do that automatically. You have to, drag and create the specific type of event handler or event that you want to trigger, right? So next question clicked would be this trigger, right? And notice that we have a couple of things here. We have this is actually a function, but our function, think about this as a method, right? This is our class, here's our method, and I'm overriding the IB action, right? That's what I'm creating, an override for this particular custom method. Okay, cool. So this is our superclass, right? We're talking about Swift, and I can also inherit protocols, right? You're going to hear that I can inherit protocols. What are protocols like? If I was going to compare protocols to other things in other object-oriented languages, what do you think they might be like? I don't have other things. So think about, I have superclasses and I have something else, right?
Constraint.
Like an interface, right? That's exactly what they're like. So think about protocols like interfaces. And what are interfaces? Anybody remember?
For like blueprints for a class.
Okay, that's one way of thinking about it. A blueprint. Anyone else have another definition for an interface?
There's no definition of the methods.
Someone else. Thank you, Sam. How about Jean-Claude? What do you think it is? I'll come back to you in a second. Huh? Come on.
What do you care?
How about Blaine? Huh? I'll tell you what it is. But Blaine, what do you think it is? Tell me what. I have to ask Blaine. Blaine's too quiet today, right?
If I remember right, they define your methods as just abstract and over the later.
Okay. And same thing what Sam said. And what are you going to say? What's yours? There's no multiple inheritance. But interfaces, what allow us to do is they allow us to create a shape, another shape for our class. Actually, what it is a contract. Think about an interface as a contract, right? It basically says if I include an interface or a protocol as part of in my list on my class, right? So if I include that on the top view here, and I can. By the way, if I inherit, hold on, Sam. If I inherit from UI view controller, that's my superclass in this particular case. So my view controller inherits from UI view controller, right? I have to put the class that I'm inheriting first in the list. Then I put a comma and I put all my protocols. That's the main way you do it. If you do it the other way around, if you put your protocols first and then you do your inherited class, it will fail. It'll error out. Not so in other languages, by the way. Other languages won't care where you're getting how you're composing your class, right? But in this case for Swift, even though it's C-like, it's a C-like language, it's not exactly the way you would think it is. All right. I mean, even though it looks like it's even some JavaScript, you might see it and go, "Hey, that's kind of like JavaScript and a bit of Python." You know, that's when you look at Swift, you're like, "No, you're wrong. It's not like that at all." Yes.
Sorry, Tom. My VM's been taking a while. Which file are we in here? You control that Swift. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I did. So I was gonna ask, and I guess I realized that.
So that's one thing. So inheritance is happening here. And then from my function, take a look at this. I have my method. This is the way we make functions or methods in classes. I need to use the func keyword, lowercase, right? Func, F-U-N-C, right? What does this method return right now? Does it return anything?
It returns a function.
It returns nothing, right? This doesn't return anything because after the method, normally what we do is we have the return type before, right?
Oh, this is like ActionScript, eh?
Well, it's very similar to other languages we've seen before, like for example JavaScript, right? So the return type, even if you've done TypeScript with me, who's done TypeScript with me in the past? Some people have done it, so you guys are all good with a little bit of TypeScript experience. Remember we did the colon right at the end, and then you can kind of indicate the class or the return type. Well, here, if I was going to indicate a return type, I can put the arrow function, and I can determine, if you notice the code hinting that I'm getting, I can tell Swift what I'm returning. So the return type happens after the method signature, right? And I have to use the arrow, right? Not a fat arrow, but a regular arrow, so a dash and a greater than sign, to kind of indicate what my return type is. Okay? Now, I'm not going to have a return type for this one. I'm just indicating how you can create a method, right? Here's a question for you guys, and I want to kind of think about this. We always talk with object-oriented programming about access modifiers. I don't see any access modifiers on this at all. In fact, you might not see them in Swift ever, right? What is the default access modifier for properties or instance variables in Java? Who remembers? Huh?
Private?
Is it private? No.
Public.
What about in C#? What's the default access modifier? I think I've asked this question before, right? What's the default access modifier for C#? Rich?
Virtual.
Sorry.
Default access modifier for properties in a class for C#.
I don't know if I don't make
How about Java, right? So one is private, look it up. One is private and the other one's public, actually, believe it or not, right? And here's the other one. What do you think it is? Is there access modifiers for Swift for classes, right? Because we're going to talk about classes and everything else. Are there access modifiers? That's the question. Anyone have any other ideas around? How about you, my friend? You're a smart guy. Tell me, what's the access modifier? Are there access modifiers in Swift? Do you think there are?
I haven't used it, but I think so.
You think so? You're probably right. But there are, right? What are the three probable access modifiers that there would be in Swift?
Public.
Public for sure. Private, you're right. And what else?
Protected.
Wrong.
Virtual.
No.
Internal.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Would internal be the same thing as protected, or?
It is the same thing as protected, right? So it's a different word. And this is the thing we're going to run into with Swift. It's the same but different, right? So internal. So the default is not private or public for Swift. It's internal. So that means it's protected. Everything you write in Swift, remember, we're talking about a type-safe language that Apple wanted to create, right? So everything you want to have in Swift, I want you to think about locking everything down. Instead of, when you write Swift, okay, so the topic of our conversation today is Swift, right? When you write Swift, think about writing everything as constants first, all right? So I'm not going to write things as a variable in Swift. If I can get away with writing it in as a constant when I create some kind of container, I want it as a constant. That is the best practice, if you will, for all Swift programs we write. And what's the keyword for constant in Swift? Anybody? You'd be wrong. What's the keyword for constant in Swift?
Let.
Let, right? So these are the keywords we're going to have to learn, and we're going to talk about this in detail, right? So if you see let and then a variable name and it equals to a value, that's a constant. And you're going to see that all over the place. You're going to see that when we create variables that are local. If I create a local variable inside of a loop, why not make it a constant, right? Because what it does is it creates it and then it's gone, right? Then what happens is it disappears. It rewrites that constant over and over again in that local scope, right? So, and why would they do that? Because what the guys at Apple have done is they say this: if we know a variable, an identifier, is going to be a constant, right? I can optimize my compiler and my performance because I know the value is never going to change. So let us make everything constant as much as possible, and it further locks down our interface, prevents any changes and weird stuff from happening, right? So let's lock everything down, and if we lock everything down, we have a higher chance that our applications will be more stable than if we use variables. That's the thinking behind using constants all the time. So you're going to see that constant stuff being used. Okay, cool. Let us take care of this other binding. So we bound our question button, and I want to bind one of my labels up here. So what if I was going to, and this isn't the app that we're building, but what if I wanted to click the question, and I want to bind my label, right, so that when I click the question, it says, hey, you clicked the question, right? So another kind of button. How would I do that? Well, it's very similar to what we did with our button. So I'm going to grab my label, right? And I'm going to hit Control, and I'm going to control drag from my label into my view controller, right, like this. And it's going to be above my IB action. And I'll tell you why in a second. I'm going to go up here with my outlet and let go. And now if you notice, it defaults to outlet. It says, here's my view controller. I'm going to name it. So this is my label. Let's call this label up here as an example, because this is my UI label up here, right? I want to call it my question label, right? So I'll just indicate that, and I'll use lowercase for that. So I'll say question label and press connect. So I'm leaving it as an outlet. Okay, cool.
I get a hand on my label, so I can't drag it.
You get a hand, and if you click Control and drag, you can control drag your label around, right? So notice I have my question label, and I have my next question clicked, right? That's what I'm doing here. So next question clicked, and I have my question label. So without doing the application that we were writing last week, so last week we were writing this quiz application, and not knowing anything, if I want something to appear in my label, you've never done this before, what do you think I need to do in my next question handler here to do something with my label?
So you reference question label?
Yes, so I do question label. There it is. It comes up because I made that name, right?
And then
Dot, and then what? Look, what it actually gives you a suggestion, right? Dot text, right? So if I go dot text, and that's pretty easy, right? And I can make it equal to or assign it to whatever value. Like for example, next, question clicked or next question clicked. Let's try this. Next question clicked. And I'm going to save that, right, as an example, and it doesn't error out. Now notice there's these two buttons in the gutter. Take a look. I've got this button, this kind of like this little circle and a target in the gutter, and I have this other circle and target in this gutter, right? This shows you, when they're full like this, it shows you there's a connection. If I hover over them, you can see what they're connected to, right, as an example, in the storyboard, right? So I got my storyboard, and I hover over, and I can see where this is going. Yeah?
What's the difference between just clicking and dragging and the control clicking?
Control click. You can't click and drag. If you click and drag, it may or may not connect.
I did think the right click.
Right click is a different thing. I didn't say you can do that too, but I would recommend control click drag. Right, it's the right way to do it. All right. There's always more than one way though. Okay. Okay, so let's test this out. So I'm going to run this thing, and notice my target is iPhone 6s Plus. I'm going to change that to iPhone 6s, right? Because that's my default. There's my iPhone 6s Plus, iPhone 6s, and then I'm going to press the play button, which looks like the play or debug button up here, right? So let's run this thing. It's going to take a second to bring up your simulator, right? So your simulator is going to come up, and when it comes up in the simulator, you're going to see that it's going to take a second or so to come up, or a few minutes for you. If it's really big, if it's massive, right? If, for example, if my scale is 100%, it might look like this, right? And that's not what you want, because I'm displaying this stuff. You want to reduce your scale a little bit, so you can go to Window, and you go to Scale, and you can go back down to something that makes sense, like 50%, right, if you need to. Okay, let's try this out. So if I click Next Question, I am expecting that this would change, right? So let's click it. Yay, next question clicked, and it appears in the middle, right? So we've done really, just with this alone, without doing anything else, we know the way things work. So what are the two connections we can make so far that we've learned about today, so far? Two connections we can make from our storyboard, two types of connections to our, into our view controller. What are the two connections? It's right there in front of you. IB outlet, and IB action. Okay, please remember that IB outlet and IB action. Interface builder, IB. Right? I know it bugs you. And when you hear this at IB, you know what? It's a throwback from the Objective-C days. That's when it came from, right? And if you notice, it's a decorator that sits in front of a function, right? Which indicates to Swift, right, or to iOS, when we're doing iOS applications, that I'm making a connection. I'm creating a binding. Think of it this way. I'm making a reference. I'll say it another way. I'm making a reference between the actual object that's on the storyboard. So it's reference, a pointer. It's pointing to that, the object in the storyboard, and I'm pointing to that. I'm containing the pointer of the memory location of the storyboard inside my view controller. Once I have, once I get a hold of it through some kind of IB outlet, right? If I want to, that's where I pump stuff out. That's my output. Anything I want to use to output, I can use an IB outlet. And everything I want to input, I need to make it an action. Okay, I want to make a question for you. Can I make more than one connection for my object that's on the storyboard? So if I have my object, a button, can I also make that an IB outlet?
Absolutely.
You say yes. Anyone have another recommendation? It's true. You can do it, right? So if I take my button, right, here's my button, and if I press Control Drag, and I drag it above my IB action, just a second, Sam, and if I let it go and leave it as outlet, and if I just call this thing my next question button, just like I called it the question label, so I'll say this next question button.
We're still building.
And if I click on connect, right, notice how I have another connection for it here, right? So if I want to, when I click my button, not only can I change the text value of my label, but if I want to here, I can change the text value of my button. So let's try this out. So in my button, I'll say next question button dot text. Let's see if I can do this, right? And now, is there a problem here? Let's take a look here, because remember, the button is not just it's not a label. So if I try typing text, is that an option for me? How about, is there what's a button made? What about, okay, set text. See if that works. Set title. There's my set title. I like the set title idea. And here's my title for my button. Notice I also have a for state. That's kind of a weird option. So I can't do that. What about other things? Is there anything else I can do?
You may have like a child object.
Maybe a child object. Like, for example, what? Like maybe a label? Right. Probably is going to be something like a label. Let's try it. Right. So if I start typing some kind of label or layer, no, that's not it. What else?
What's that value?
set value. Okay, let's try set value, but it gives me if you notice, there's two values I got to set. And what's the question mark? What does that question mark mean in Swift? Hold on.
Anything.
No, I like your thinking though.
Uh,
I know you're guessing, but I want you as developers. This is what we do. We jump in with both feet. We try and figure out what the hell everything means, right?
it's optional.
It's an optional. It's an optional. And optional for us means that it may or may not be something we call upon. We may not use it, right? So I don't have to use an object like this, right? Yes.
The current title.
Current title. Let's take a look. Let's see if it's current title. Current title. Yeah, it's a string. And then let's make it equal to, clicked. Just make it clicked instead of next question. So we know we can modify it. I get an error. How come I'm getting an error? And what's my error that I'm getting, right? So we're going to get these little things because again, you'll be forgiven to think you can do this kind of stuff. Let's check this out and see how it works. So if I click on the error, it says cannot assign to property. Current title is a get-only property. So if that's a get-only property, is there maybe a set current title?
Possibly.
Let's take a look, right? If it's a getter and setter, then let's try this out. So if I say set, I can't do set current title. I can probably try and set title. And if you notice now, I have my for state, which is my UI control state, and I have my title string. Let's just try and not modify my for state over here, but I want to modify my title string. And notice how I have my title string in here to whatever I want. I can start off with my title string as clicked and see if that errors out for me, right? So I save that. It looks like it accepted it. It's accepting it, right, for my button. And now let's run it in my simulator to see what actually it gives me, right? So I'm running it back in my simulator, and it says build failed, right? Why did it fail? It says editor placeholder in source file. There it is. Editor placeholder in source file, right? So that's what it does. It's not really a, I'll be honest with you, it's not a great answer for me, right? Editor, If I click up here, and if I look at if I want to try and find my error, it's right here. So obviously there's some kind of error here that I'm getting that I didn't account for. I'm not sure why it's not giving me. And look over here on the right side. Here's my outlets and my IB actions for my next question, right? And somehow or another, I've got a copy of what I've got in there without my stuff that's inside. Right? I don't have my sender, any object, or anything like that. Let's click this off for a second. And I've lost somehow my storyboard. So how do I get it back? How do I get my storyboard back? This is what's going to happen to you when you're starting to use this ID. Yeah.
The overlapping circles.
What?
The overlapping circles.
Okay. I'm going to go to the overlapping circle. How do I? Tell me what to do. I got this now. Okay. Here's my left panel. Yeah. Storyboard. Okay. So I'm going to click away and click back, and there it is. Good. And I'm telling you that the reason why we're going through this is because, guys, you're going to run into this. You're going to, oh my God, my editor disappeared. Where do I get it from? How do I get it back? Don't panic. You can always get it back. It's just a series of things. So this is wrong, right? So just for your own learning, let's look up how to do that. How do I change a button, the text of a button, right, in Swift? How do I do that? And I want you guys to tell me the answer. So look it up, and I want you to Google it. Guys, you know why I'm not getting you to do this? Because you're going to do something funky for your calculator app. I'm not going to be around to help you out, right? And you're going to have to look it up because part of what we do as developers is we have some incomplete information, right? And we have an idea of what we want to do, and we don't know how to do it. And I'll tell you right now, Swift is one of the most documented languages that's out there, even how young it is. You could find the answer, right? How do I change the text of my button? Yes.
I'll put dot normal at the end of UI control state.
Okay, so UI control state dot normal is what they say.
Yeah, and my Xcode is underlining in red UI control state when it's just.
And mine isn't, right? So UI control state dot, oops, I'll type this in here, right? Dot normal, right? That's what you're saying to do.
Why are we placing this in there again?
That's required.
Dude, Ben, I don't care.
Okay, still got an error.
I don't think you need UI control state.
So you want me to get rid of it?
No, just have dot normal.
Okay, let's try that out. So just dot normal.
So what,
How can that be? How would dot normal be a? I'm just asking the question. I know the answer. How would dot normal be a an answer for this? Yes.
it already knows what type it's gonna accept, so it's gonna look for that in the enumeration value.
Okay. Let's see if this works. First of all, enumeration. I like what you just said there. Let's see if it builds. I'm going to build this up, and build succeeded, and then it's going to bring up my thing. And if I click on this thing, I have both things changed: my button and the label that just changed. Right. I like what you said there. We're going to get into enumerations today, right? Enumerations, I remember enums, they're usually called enums in other languages. They're available in C#, they're available in Java, they're available in TypeScript, okay, if you're using TypeScript for JavaScript, they're available there too. Enumerations, it's like another data type, yeah? But they give you a kind of things. They give you the dot accessor methods, how we use them. For example, day.Monday would be the enumeration. Monday would be your value, right? Day.Monday. Well, instead of putting day in there, Swift allows you to put in .Monday, and so it knows what the enumeration is. That's why you can put in .normal. It's really a part of the four-state enumeration. Okay, and that's how we would do it. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, guys, is because, again, you're going to come up with some kind of stuff. It doesn't work. You're going to get into a block, and you're going to go, how the hell do I do this stuff? Look it up. It's there. There's so much out there for Swift. There's videos for Swift. There's tons of stuff. And part of what we're going to do is Swift. But for the most part, I'll tell you right now, the stuff we're looking at right now is not Swift. All right? The stuff we're looking at is, we're using the Swift language, but it's the iOS SDK. And it's an API we have to learn, and there's a pattern about it. The reason they're looking for specific inputs and outputs here in the iOS SDK, we're using Swift to handle the API. Just like if I was learning Node, right? When I learn Node, am I really learning JavaScript? I need to know a little bit about JavaScript. But JavaScript, Node for JavaScript, or JavaScript for Node, is totally different than JavaScript if I want to modify my document object model, right? Or if I want to manipulate it. It's totally a different thing that we're learning here for JavaScript, if I'm just making that comparison. Same with Swift, right? If I run Swift or write Swift on its own, it has nothing to do with my iOS application, so there is no API that I'm worried about or whatever. I can run it, and I wouldn't have all these decorators and everything else, right? And where are these decorators coming from anyway? Well, it's coming from this imported UIKit SDK, this UIKit library, right? So when I import UIKit, I have access to the view controller, right? I have access to the UI view controller class, which includes all of these methods that I can override, right? And the decorators for IB outlet and IB action. Okay, so that's the only way that I'm going to get that. If I wipe away my import UI kit, so if I take this away as an example, and I save it, now you can see that there's all these errors, right? Because it doesn't understand what UI view controller is, right? It comes from the namespace UI kit, right? Library. Let's go back. Questions around this about IB outlet and IB action, right? This is how you would finish off your quiz at. Okay, we're hanging out around 10:20, and I think it's a great place to get some coffee, some black coffee for me, right? And some other coffee for other people. I'm going to go out with Rich, and we're going to grab some coffee at, what is it, second class or first class?
First class.
Sorry, second class. You like that second class? Huh? And then we're going to come back, right?
Well, you can go to the first class.
Rich going to second class? Okay, all right, thanks.
That's for running the last class.